The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
Well, there's new information in the case of the Kentucky sheriff that shot the judge. Not the deputy, but the judge. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. It's what some people call him, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crimebuster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. We're going to talk about that judge up there in Kentucky who just all of a sudden, in a very, very, very crazy case, a bizarre case, just turned around and shot the judge point blank. We're going to talk to you about that today. There's some new information that's coming around that I think you might be interested in. This would actually be, I think it's our third or fourth episode in that series. Started the series way back last year in about when this happened, back in the last fall of last year. And now we're getting ready to get you updated on that. But before we do that, welcome. We're glad to have you a part of the Charlie Crime Train today. Let me remind you, if you have not hit that subscribe button, please do so and hit that like button. That helps us get the word out about what we're doing with Charlie Crimebuster. So do that if you would, please. And check out our sponsor, PeacemakerNetwork.com, PeacemakerNetwork.com. You'll read all about the men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. And if you like to get caught up on all the other episodes, go to CharlieCrimebuster.com. CharlieCrimebuster.com. You'll find, well, over 200 episodes there for you to binge-cast in, as James Buckland, our producer, says. All right, let's get right to our case today. Now, last fall, we did share some episodes of the bizarre case of the Kentucky sheriff that shot the local judge. You've heard the song, you know, I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot the deputy. Well, this guy shot the judge and did not shoot the deputy. On September the 19th of the year 2024, Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins, well, he shot and killed District Judge Kevin Mullins. Shot him inside the county courthouse. Not only inside the county courthouse, shot him in the judge's chambers. You see, around 3 p.m. on that September the 19th, which would be a year ago, then Steins, the sheriff, walked into the outer chambers of Mullins, and he told all the courthouse employees, well, that he needed to talk with Mullins privately. And so the two, he and the judge, walked into the inner chambers of the judge's office. He closed the door behind them. Several minutes later, shots were fired. Then Steins, he walked outside the courthouse, was walking away from the courthouse. Deputy called out to him. He kept going, but then he turned around, walked back into the courthouse and said, you don't have to look for anybody else. There's no mass shooter. It was me. And so the Letcher County Sheriff, Sean Mickey Steins, is now charged with killing District Judge Kevin Mullins in his chambers. Well, as you can imagine, this shocked this small eastern Kentucky community. By the way, I've been there in this very town, Whitesburg. I've been there. It is a very small city. And the sheriff's office there is a little different. It handles all the court situations, not only the jail, but the court. That means even the warrants and all that sort of thing. As far as the investigative parts of the county, mostly that's done by the Kentucky State Police, as it is in several of those small towns. But the sheriff there, he is very close to the court, very close to the judge, and he and Mullins were good friends. And the real difference about this particular one, this was all caught on security camera footage. In other words, the murder of the judge was found on video. Now, the ex-sheriff, he's ex-sheriff now, he of course resigned, he's pled not guilty to the charge of murder of a public official. And again, the crime was caught on video, and it appears to be an open, shut case. But hey, wait a minute, not so quick. there are additional factors coming to the surface that will make this trial, if there is one, really, really most interesting. In fact, it was State Police Detective Clayton Stamper. He detailed the moments before and after the September 19th shooting. He did that when he was before the grand jury, and that was included in court filings. Shortly after the shooting, as I said earlier, a deputy did see him walking away with a blank look on his face. Now think about that. Blank look on his face, as though he was in another world. He ignored the deputy's questions. That's what Stamper told the grand jury. He said 2 other officers had entered the courthouse. They were going to be looking for an active shooter. And then Steins walked right in behind him and said, "Hey, there's nobody else. It was me." Now, officers responding to the shooting, they found the judge on the floor of his office with several gunshot wounds. The detective said he then reviewed the video from Mullen's chamber, which showed Steins, the sheriff, asking 4 people to leave a few minutes before the shooting, and then Steins gets up from a chair, checks several doors, then borrows the judge's phone. And then, he said Steins fired 2 shots at Mullins. As Mullins reached around the desk, fired another shot. Then, as he was leaving, he reached under the desk, fired 6 more shots. So here we go. He initially fires 2 shots, reaches around the desk, fires another shot. Then as he leaves, he's reaching under the desk, and then he fired 6 more shots. So he certainly wanted to make sure that the judge was dead, it appears, right? Now, the question has never been, folks, has never been who shot the judge. The question's always been not who, but why. These guys were friends. They had worked together. They had even been recognized for their joint efforts in a criminal justice reform for the area. They had put together a program for addicted people who were addicted to drugs, to be able to seek treatment in lieu of jail time. And it appeared to be working. That was until a corrupt deputy decided to exploit the program. And he decided to seek sexual favors for himself in return for peripheral treatment in that program. And now, the sheriff, prior to his shooting the judge, he was being sued because of not his actions, but his deputy's actions. Which I got to tell you is not uncommon. As a chief deputy myself, I found myself included in several lawsuits just because of the mere position of my role in the department. In other words, when they begin to sue, they're trying to get to the deep pockets. They're trying to get to the county. Or to get to the county, they often have to go through the chief deputy. Then they have to go through the sheriff. That's even for things that our officers may have done, which may or may not have been liable situations that they were involved in. They're always going for the big pockets. In order to get to the big pockets, they have to go through the individual. So I did not take that very seriously because we had attorneys that handled all that. And there were times I was involved in depositions with the sheriff's department, except Sheriff Steins, he was taking this very seriously. It was really impacting his mental health. And that's what we've been told, even prior to the shooting. We've been told that this had impacted his mental health. Now, here's what we do know. The judge had lunch with the sheriff and others on that day. They were all eating at a local place there that they ate. It wasn't uncommon for them to go out to eat lunch together. This was the courthouse gang, you might say. They all worked together. Even before Steins was the sheriff, he was, of course, working in this judge's courtroom as a bailiff. He had been there. They knew each other. The people all knew one another, and they were out eating lunch. They said there wasn't anything unusual that happened at lunch, except that the sheriff was going to talk to the judge about something. The judge said, well, we ought to really talk about this in my chamber. So we do know that the sheriff had lunch with the judge and others on that day. Number 2, we do know the sheriff later walked into the judge's chambers and shot the judge. And number 3, we know that he came out and gave himself over to the authorities about incident. And number 4, he said, just treat me fair. My wife and daughter were held hostage. Wow, where did that come from? I remember when this first happened, I said, what in the world is going on? He said that his wife and daughter were held hostage. He said that they've kidnapped my wife and my daughter. Now, Jeremy Bartley, attorney, he argued that Steins was experiencing, quote, unquote, an extreme emotional disturbance. And by the way, that would impact the charge of murder. In other words, he was saying that there's not enough evidence to substantiate a murder charge. It should not be a murder charge. It should be a manslaughter charge because he was under an extreme emotional experience. He did say, the attorney said, they maybe had probable cause for manslaughter, but not murder. Now, we now have some new information, though, and we told you about this in the other episodes, but we have some new information about this mental state of the sheriff, and it's it certainly has opened my eyes to look at this case in a totally different way, and I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. But first, we always like to take time in our episode to share with you what we call a Crazy Crook story. Now, last week, folks, I know that you all did not hear a Crazy Crook story. That is because last week we were talking about that terrible, terrible school shooting in Minnesota. And it was a somber but a very necessary episode to do. And so, because of the sobering part of that particular episode, because it was so serious about these children being killed, we just did not feel that we should do a Crazy Crook story. So we didn't forget it. For those of you who reach out to us, no, we didn't forget it. It's just that we left it out. But now we're going to take a moment and we're going to take our breath and we're going to share with you Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, my friend, maybe Florida can have some relief on the Crazy Crook stories. I know we've told a ton of them from right here in Florida, these Crazy Crooks, but at least they can get some relief, at least for the day. In fact, my friend Florida man may well be replaced with California woman after you hear about what happened today. So here we go with our Crazy Crook story. There's a California woman now who had illegally, get this, oh, you can't make it up. She illegally registered her dog to vote and cast two ballots under the canine's name. That's according to officials. Laura Lee Urick, 62 years of age, of Costa Mesa. She faces 5 felony charges, including perjury, procuring or offering a false or forged document to be filed, casting a ballot when not entitled to vote, and registering a non-existent person to vote. That's according to Orange County District Attorney's Office. Now, Urick submitted to mail-in ballots under her dog's name, Maya Jean Yorks, during the 2021 gubernatorial recall election, and also in the 2022 primary. The district attorney's office said that. The recall ballot, well, it was counted. The primary ballot was rejected. The recall ballot again was counted. The woman then reported herself in October of last year to the Orange County Register of Voters Office, which reported her to the district attorney's office. An investigation into the incident, well, it actually revealed, hold on to your hat, she not only did it, she posted about it. Yep, there you go. Pause before you post, folks. She posted about her dog's voting activity on social media. And so, in the year of 2022, she posted a photo of her dog wearing, now her dog was wearing, you see they wear all kinds of little clothes today. Well, this dog was wearing I voting sticker. And the dog was posing with the ballot. In October of last year, she posted another photo of the dog's collar and a mail-in ballot addressed to the animal, saying that Maya may still receive the ballot despite the fact that the dog passed away. She's still getting her ballot. That's what Urick's wrote. Well, be careful what you post, because now she faces a maximum sentence of 6 years in prison if convicted on all accounts. So, my friend, this crazy California woman, this crazy California crook, who actually illegally had her dog vote in an election, is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now back to our main focus. It now appears to me that we do have a motive for the sheriff shooting the judge. All before I was asking, why? The country's asking, why? Well, there is a motive, and I believe it was revealed at the very, very first. You see, I don't believe that his defense attorney is just now coming up with some imaginative way to defend his client. I believe the attorney really believed and still believes that this is a situation where the sheriff was indeed going through some sort of extreme emotional experience, and he literally lost it in a maze of paranoid thinking. Consider the facts. This was not just something that came up at the shooting. The sheriff's behavior prior to this incident reveals some pretty bizarre things about the sheriff. Now, someone had even written, as the top cop in Letcher County, Sheriff Sean Mickey, he knew all about the inside of a jail cell. But after he was arrested, according to this author, he couldn't even recognize it in the days after he allegedly murdered the local judge at his own desk. That was according to a social worker who examined him. In fact, the social worker said, quote, upon evaluation of Mr. Steins, it appears that he's still in an active state of psychosis. That's what her report from 4 days after the shooting states. Said that Steins was unaware of his surroundings and only aware of things that the jail staff would tell him. Now, his defense team made the evaluation public as part of its effort to have the murder case against him thrown out. They allege that the first-degree murder indictment is tainted because during that first grand jury hearing where they got the indictment, the prosecutors did not give the grand jury all of the medical records that the grand jury requested. In fact, it was the first public look at the mental state of the former sheriff. Now, 7 of the shots were fired while the judge was on the ground next to his desk. They say now that the sheriff was insane at the time of the killing, and they want a full mental health report, which was currently sealed. They want it released to the public. Now, he's still being held without bond on the charge of first-degree murder. He did plead not guilty back in November, and he does face the possibility of the death penalty if he is convicted. But although there's no available public evaluation, Steins that classified him as mentally deficient, there's a whole number now of people of his co-workers and friends that have been interviewed by the state police, and they're all saying, many of these people saying that he was acting very, very strange in the days leading up to the shooting of Mullins. Now, a lot of that, people say it all happens around the time that he was facing stress way back on that civil lawsuit we talked about at the beginning of the program. He was deposed 3 days before the shooting in relation, of course, to that sex for favors reports, after he terminated one of his deputies for the deputy's involvement in that, and that dated back to 2021. Now, according to court documents, investigators interviewed attorney Daniel Dotson the day after the shooting, and Dotson reported, now get this is the attorney that was involved in that deposition, he testified that he had actually urged the sheriff to get some help. Dotson also told the Kentucky State Police that he spoke to Kevin Mullins and he told Mullins that Mickey is losing it and that he could not take this kind of pressure in reference to the civil suit. Now, the pair reportedly spoke the night before Mullins' death, and Dotson recalled telling his own wife, he said that the sheriff has, quote, unquote, lost his mind. And that happened all before this situation. Stamper said that Steins even told the officers when they were arresting him, they're trying to kidnap my wife and kid. That was as he was taken into custody. Kidnap my wife and kid. Well, my friend, there's one thing that's sure about this. Either the sheriff is doing an acting job that is worthy of an Academy Award, or he has one of the largest doses of paranoid that I've seen in a long, long time. Now, I've been reviewing some of the newly released video of the sheriff after his arrest. This guy is definitely convinced that someone is about to kill him. And this could be the same thing that we now know that impacted his problems at home. We know about that now. We didn't know about it then when we did the first episodes, but even right before this shooting, he wasn't living at home. That's why he showed up without his uniform when he went to shoot the judge. He wasn't living at home. His wife couldn't take it any longer, all this paranoid thinking. And it probably is another reason why he wanted to call his daughter there when he was in the judge's chamber, before he went crazy and shot the judge. Even before that, he had gone that day to his daughter's home, and she would not see him. Again, because of all these crazy things, this paranoid that was around him. My friend, this man had problems, and he went off the rails, and he shot the judge. Now, I am going to say that proving this kind of a thing in most trials is extremely difficult to do. The insanity defense rarely works in a court setting. Just think about all the crazy serial killers, even serial killers that eat other human beings. And even as crazy as they do not get away with an insanity plea, much less now a sheriff. But in Kentucky, there's at least a good chance that this sheriff may not be charged or convicted with murder, but it may at least be dropped to manslaughter because, again, of an extreme emotional experience. There is a law in Kentucky that if you're involved in extreme emotional experience, that would negate a murder charge, but it would actually be a lesser charge. I don't know that he's going to get away with an insanity plea, but I do believe that it may result in at least lesser charges and lesser penalty. Now, you're probably saying right now, it still just does not make sense that he would shoot his friend the judge. The judge was not found to be a part of the deputy's case. There are some, though, that are now coming forward saying that the judge did have sex in his chambers with some women, but not necessarily tied to that case itself. And we do know that the sheriff's daughter's phone was actually found in the judge's phone. Her phone number was found in the judge's phone. Now, let me say very, very plainly, the daughter and the wife have repeatedly said there was no connection to the judge in a sexual manner in any way. But for a man, listen to me, for a man that was absorbed with paranoid thoughts, including the kidnapping of his wife and daughter and people trying to kill him, and who's walking about in a daze, it would not be a stretch for him to think that the judge was doing something with his daughter. And to think that he was perhaps protecting his daughter by shooting the judge. So, my friend, I believe the bottom line is that this case gets to trial. The defense will argue without a shadow of a doubt that this was an extreme emotional experience for the sheriff. And an extreme emotional experience in the state of Kentucky, well, it does impact the charges. Maybe he'll even follow that up with a full, all-right-out insanity defense. The question is, will it work? What do you think? Do you think that this sheriff is just trying to pull the wool over people's eyes? And if he is, had he thought about that all the way the weeks before that when he started behaving in these strange, bizarre ways? Did he all of a sudden come up with this plan to shoot the judge and think about it through the weeks? If so, that's premeditation. If so, that's premeditated murder. If so, that means he could go to life in prison for his life and without the possibility of parole could even face the death penalty. Or could it be that the attorney will be able to prove, based on the actions of this sheriff, that he was under an extreme emotional experience? What do you think? We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me, Charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, Charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Hey, this case is just getting really warmed up. Will it go to trial? I kind of think they're going to work out some kind of plea deal before. What about you? What do you think? Will this case go to trial? Will the sheriff face a jury of his peers? Will he face a judge himself, even though he shot another judge? What will happen in this case? Love to hear from you. Charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, Charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Hey, during the last YouTube deal that we did, that you probably listened to since then, I mentioned about another sheriff down in Tennessee, my home state. A sheriff in McNairy County, a sheriff known as Walking Tall, Buford Pulser. Well, there's some new things about him that's come to, and I mean, it is, you talk about a blockbuster, It is right there. Would you like to see us cover that? I'd love to hear from you about that as well. Charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Till this time next week, this is Charlie Crimebuster, reminding you, be safe, be alert for the life you save. It may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional information and podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts, or for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster.